What the Bible never told you about Sodom and Gomorrah. Before the fire came, Abraham did something almost no one remembers about this story. He argued with God, not prayed, not begged, argued, negotiating God down, city by city, soul by soul, trying to talk the creator of the universe out of destroying two entire cities before a single flame had fallen. And God let him. That's the detail every retelling skips. God didn't silence Abraham. He stood there and let a human being bargain with him, again and again, until Abraham ran out of numbers to ask for. By the end of this story, you'll understand why this isn't really a story about sin at all. Why the sin of Sodom, the Bible names explicitly, has almost nothing to do with what most sermons claim it's about. And why the most disturbing moment in this entire account doesn't happen in the burning cities. It happens afterward, in a cave, in the dark, between a father and his own daughters. This is Sodom and Gomorrah, what Genesis never told you. The story doesn't open with fire. It opens with a negotiation. 3 visitors arrive at Abraham's tent. The text is deliberately ambiguous about whether they're men, angels, or God himself in disguise. And over a shared meal, they reveal the real purpose of the visit. The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah has grown so great that God is going down to see for himself whether it's as bad as the reports suggest. Abraham's nephew Lot lives in Sodom. And Abraham, knowing this, does something audacious. He steps toward God and asks a question that should unsettle you every time you read it. Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Then he starts bargaining. Would God spare the city for 50 righteous people? God says yes. 45? Yes. 40, 30, 20. Each time, Abraham pushes further, and each time, God agrees, all the way down to 10. 10 righteous people, and the whole city would be spared. Abraham stops at 10. Maybe he ran out of nerve. Maybe he assumed 10 was more than enough, given that his own nephew's family alone was several people. Either way, the number holds, and it becomes the quiet, devastating hinge of everything that follows. Because when the angels finally arrive in Sodom, they can't find 10. They can barely find 4. That night, 2 angels enter the city disguised as travelers, and Lot, sitting at the city gate, the ancient equivalent of a place of civic authority, insists they stay in his home rather than sleep in the town square. It's an act of hospitality that, in the context of the ancient world, was not optional politeness. It was a sacred duty. And it's this exact duty that gets violently tested within hours. Before the household can even settle for the night, men from the city, described as surrounding the house, both young and old, all the people to the last man, demand that Lot hand over his guests so the crowd can assault them. This is the moment most sermons build an entire theology around, and it's worth being precise about what the text actually emphasizes. The crime on display isn't a private relationship between 2 people. It's a mob, at a stranger's door, demanding to violate guests under a host's protection, in a city where the text says the entire population, old and young alike, turned out to take part. Lot's response is almost as disturbing as the mob's demand. He offers his own 2 daughters to the crowd instead, begging them to leave his guests alone. The men refuse. It's the angels, not Lot, who ultimately save the household, striking the mob blind and pulling Lot back inside before shutting the door. That single detail, that Lot would offer his daughters to a violent crowd, is almost never discussed in Sunday retellings, and it should be. This isn't a story with an uncomplicated hero. Lot, the righteous man, spared from the fire, makes a decision here that most modern readers find as horrifying as anything the mob does. Genesis doesn't editorialize about it. It just lets the moment sit there, unresolved, the way ancient narrative often does, trusting the reader to feel the weight of it without being told how to feel. The judgment itself comes swiftly. At dawn, the angels urge Lot to gather his family and flee, warning them not to look back. Lot hesitates so long that the angels physically grab his hands and the hands of his wife and daughters, pulling them out of the city. A detail that undercuts any image of Lot as eager to escape a place he supposedly recognized as doomed. Even facing annihilation, he lingers. Then comes the moment almost everyone knows, even people who've never read Genesis. As the cities burn behind them, Lot's wife looks back, and becomes a pillar of salt. The text gives no explanation of mechanism, no elaborate punishment scene. Just a single sentence, almost clinical in its brevity, that turns one of the most quietly tragic figures in the entire Bible into a permanent monument standing in a landscape of ash. She isn't even named. We know her only by what happened to her, not who she was, a wife and mother who, whatever her reasons, could not stop herself from turning toward the home and life she was losing. Fire and sulfur fall on the cities, brimstone, in the old translations, and Genesis says the smoke rose, like the smoke of a furnace, visible even from where Abraham stood the next morning, looking out over a landscape that no longer had two cities in it at all. But the story doesn't end with the fire. And this is where almost every retelling stops, right at the dramatic climax, leaving out an ending so uncomfortable that it explains, more than anything else in the story, why later Israelite writers viewed the region and its neighboring peoples with such deep unease. Lot and his two daughters end up alone in a cave in the hills, afraid to live among people again. Believing there are no other men left on earth to give them children, an assumption the text doesn't bother to justify, just states, the daughters devise a plan, get their father drunk, on 2 consecutive nights, and each of them sleeps with him in order to conceive. Genesis states plainly that Lot did not know when his daughters lay down or rose. Both daughters become pregnant. Their sons become the ancestors of 2 neighboring nations, the Moabites and the Ammonites, peoples who would remain, for centuries afterward, in complicated and often hostile relationships with Israel. Read the whole arc together and the story stops looking like a simple morality tale about a wicked city getting what it deserved. It becomes something far stranger. A story where nearly everyone involved, the mob, Lot, even Lot's daughters, makes a choice that a modern reader recognizes as deeply wrong, and the text records almost all of it without a single line of direct condemnation. No angel scolds Lot for offering his daughters. No narrator condemns the daughters for what happens in the cave. The judgment in this story falls entirely, exclusively, on the cities themselves. And everyone who walks out of the wreckage carries their own unresolved darkness with them, unpunished, unexplained, simply reported. That's the detail worth sitting with longest. Sodom and Gomorrah is remembered as the story of a righteous man escaping a wicked city. But Genesis, read carefully, tells a colder and more honest story. That judgment fell on a place, not a bloodline, and that surviving the fire never meant anyone walked away clean. Abraham had bargained God down to 10 righteous people. In the end, Genesis suggests, the cities couldn't produce even that, and the family that did survive carried the same unresolved brokenness out with them into the hills, into the dark, into the next chapter of a story that never once claims escaping judgment is the same thing as being good.